Hello and welcome to Thank You for Spore-ing, Episode 7. This is a podcast that really misses hanging out at the mall. I am Eric Scull, and my friend Chad Hopkins is on with me again. Hello, Chad.
Hello, Eric. I'm not going to lie. A couple days ago, I had a weird desire to walk around my local mall.
Okay.
I did not.
Oh.
I think I would prefer to walk around in an environment like this than around people. But
okay, that's interesting. I was going to say don't walk around the malls. Walking around malls, I was at one last week. It's sad. The business is not, so everything's gone online, and largely the types of businesses that can be at a mall are like giant gyms and maybe the occasional Antians, but not the sort of robust kind of well-stocked, questionably well-stocked places that we saw in this episode of HBO's The Last of Us. But I do agree, this is the kind of episode that makes you want to go to the mall for sure. Maybe in the early 2000s. one of those malls. So a mall where you could still find photo booths and
the mall of my childhood.
Yeah.
Our childhood.
Right. Yes. So in fact, I think my mall that I grew up with stopped having a lot of the stores right around 2005, 2006. I got a job at the movie theater that worked in the mall, and yeah, all my favorite places had kind of gone out by that point. The comic store was no longer there. We still had an FYE entertainment store. I bought a lot of like CDs there and movie posters, and of course we had Spencer's, but yeah, that was about it. The big department stores had kind of gone away.
Yeah, those are definitely gone. The mall I frequent the most isn't my local childhood mall. It's got a nice movie theater, and it's kind of in the rich part of town, so it's actually still doing pretty well. But my local one is a different story, and I haven't stepped in that one since I was a child. So, anyways, we're not here to talk about malls.
No, as a matter of fact, this is not a mall podcast. Although the amount of times we've
Chad and Eric.
Okay, first of all, we're gonna do that podcast.
Coming up next.
We had to have a plan for between the seasons of HBO's The Last of Us. I'd say that's as good as any. No, we are here to talk about HBO's The Last of Us, particularly episode 7, which was titled Left Behind. And before we do that, we're going to be talking actually about, was there anything in the last week since our episode 6 recap that you wanted to bring up at the start of our show this week?
The only thing I had to say is I was watching you play The Last of Us Part 1 on your Twitch stream last night.
Yes, thank you.
Late night, yes. And I shared this with you because you were right at the part in the game that we saw at the end of episode 6 where Joel and Ellie are at the university, and Joel gets injured, but the injury is very different in the video game. Joel falls literally like 2 stories out of a building and then lands and is impaled by rebar. And I like the change because obviously in the game we see it happen in real time and there's no mystery to it. And in the show, one, it's a more believable circumstance that Joel could actually walk out of, or Pedro Pascal could actually walk out of.
Sure.
But 2, we also get that steady, slow reveal of the bat actually impaling him. We don't see it automatically. We don't know what's happened, so it's like a shock. And I like that. I think that's a great story thing to do.
Yeah. And part of the joy for me of the process that we have going on, so playing along in the video game in the week leading up is always a good experience. I did that again before tonight's episode as well, and I'm trying to, in a timely manner, put them all on YouTube. Then watching HBO show, coming on, recording this podcast, and then after editing this podcast and releasing it, listening to the official Last of Us podcast. Man, that whole series of events is keeping me busy the whole week through and
Yeah, I
is
bet.
such a delight. It's so wonderful. But also, after finishing the work of editing and releasing our show, then getting to hear what Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin and what Troy Baker think about it, the show, their show, not ours,
Right.
is such a great thing, because oftentimes things we're speculating about, well, they'll just come out and tell us what certain character motivations are. Some people would like that. I think some people maybe would be like, oh, I don't need to know what the character's thinking. But the level of insight that that podcast is offering into character motivations is far and above, like, way more than I was expecting out of the official podcast. And I like it because they're able to do it in such a way where it gives you answers, but there's ultimately more questions. You can tell that these are truly masters of their craft, and they enjoy kind of telling us what the thought process was for the adaptation. And I like that.
Right. It's obviously a crafted, sort of tailored experience because it's an official podcast. And so it doesn't have the ragtag go getter kind of attitude that you and I have as amateurs.
Our podcast is
But
more fun as
right.
amateurs. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
that said, they are clearly, as you said, masters of their craft, and they are, even however curated it may be, they are giving us lots of creative insight into their process and why they made decisions they made and how they view the characters and the decisions that they're making. And I think that is so cool. They're doing a great job. It's a great podcast.
Yeah, I mean, and they're the definitive voices. There's nobody else you'd seek out about, hey, what what was the choice? What was this made for? And they have a good rapport. And it's just funny seeing, all the sort of the character things we were speculating about get called out by the showrunners. But I wouldn't claim to be special or prophetic. I think the thing is, these episodes are also crafted to make us ask the questions about the characters that we are asking, and that's why we ask them on the podcast. But the joy of it all for me is talking about it with you specifically. So
Oh,
I love that we have that. No, I do. I love getting your thoughts. Even just last week in particular, we're talking about whether Joe was being manipulative or not, of Tommy, and what was going through his
yeah.
head. And I just continually enjoy watching the show along with you and getting that alternate insight. And when we agree, great. When we don't agree, that's almost even better. So,
Yeah.
and Druckmann and Mazin settle the score. They settle the tie. They break the tie.
Right.
But I didn't write down. I'm not keeping score. I didn't remember what we talked about last week. What they said on it as far as Tommy and Joel. But I think in general it was somewhere in the middle. So
Right. Yeah.
but yes. So as a reminder to our listeners, we do have a spoiler policy on this show, and it is basically that because this show is being adapted from the game, we are going to be talking about how the game and show are different. But what we won't be doing is talking about what happens next in the story, which we're basing on the game. That is going to be discussed, but at the end of the show, past a spoiler curtain. And the timestamp of that is always available in the show notes. And there's literal bells that play. So you can't miss it. And let's get into our overall thoughts on Left Behind, episode 7 of HBO's show.
Well, they did it. They adapted Left Behind.
They
And
did it.
I mean, I don't need to tread the previously trod path of I haven't played the game recently, and so I don't remember Left Behind super well, but there it is. So all of my vague recollections of story points are there, and I really like that. And I actually really like how they framed the Left Behind DLC story of Riley and Ellie's sort of last night together within the greater context of what is happening in present day, because that is different from Left Behind. Left Behind, you're going back and forth between Ellie and in the past, Ellie in the future, back and forth. And so you're sort of playing two different games at the same time, or at least two different storylines. Here, we're firmly in 2000, well, I guess it's the same year, but we're firmly in the past with Riley and Ellie in the mall for the entirety of the episode, except for like maybe one cutaway where we
Yeah.
see Ellie just sort of like mulling over her thoughts. Um, and then it's the flashback itself informs decisions that Ellie then makes by the end of the episode. And I think that's a really smart way to do it. And adapt the source material in a great way and in an authentic way, but still giving it a new twist like they've been doing this whole show.
Yeah, it would have been really jarring had they gone back and forth too many times. I kept waiting for it to go to the present, but I was like, when it didn't happen, I was like, oh, they just kind of needed to show us that Joel was alive. And that's the big thing coming off of what we spoke of last week is like, well, you end the episode on this huge cliffhanger. Had they not shown the Ellie and Joel Joel bleeding out, telling her to go, this whole episode, had none of that been in it, people really would have been like, well, holy crap, what is going on with Joel? Like, what, for another week? And I think it would have reached a fever pitch. Now, here's something that might surprise you. I did actually peek into the official podcast now, and they actually open with this concept that HBO requested a present day update, probably for those same reasons. They wanted to know what was up with that, because originally, I guess, it was only going to be a full flashback episode with no ties to the future. Craig Mazin is the first person to say it's actually better this way. They laugh about it, the game very much being that way, but it really comes down to exactly what you said. Ellie's choice at the end of the episode to go back downstairs, find the things to help Joel live, are informed fully by her relationship with this girl that unfortunately she couldn't save. And she's going to save her every last moment there. So it's I think the first time I was able to use something from the official podcast to make our show better. But I thought that was a cool discussion point, because I really can't see for how often the story switches back and forth in the DLC, and it's actually really well done. In the game, there's two malls.
Right.
Essentially, Joel and Ellie are holed up in a mall, and Ellie has to go to like the pharmacy across the way to get sutures. And here she just is able to go upstairs at the house that they are in the show. But it works so well in the game, but also has a lot more stuff that you just don't need to tell this story. And they have such it's a very intimate cast in this episode. It focuses on precious few characters. It's basically Ellie and Riley with a little bit of Joel and a little bit less of some of Ellie's boarding school folk and what the situation is there. But I'm blown away, because as much as we've known that Bella Ramsey can act, this is the episode where she's running the ship 100%. It's all about what we know about this character from before, but takes place before that. And she has to do more of it. And she has to do, what was Ellie before she was bitten? Was she hopeful? Did she have love? This episode answers all those questions, and for that reason is great. And it's another great adaptation from Druckmann and Mazin. Those are my overall thoughts.
Okay, let's go into the details then. I co-sign everything you said.
Okay, great, awesome. That's why I have you keep coming back. Okay, so Joel is still alive. Yes, this is a big deal. For me, coming off of last week where we had the sort of minor difference in Joel's vulnerability with Tommy and how really terrified he was. He told Tommy how terrified he was of failure. For me, when I look into, as the camera looks into Joel's eyes in this episode, I think he's suffering the fact that he has failed. I think that this means that he has failed in his mission to protect her, just as he assumed he would when he took her on. And I bet there's a whole nother level of like regret that's going through him right now for giving her the choice to choose him, because he's about to die.
Right. He absolutely thinks he's about to die. That's the only reason he's saying, hey, Ellie, go, leave me, I'm gonna die here, you need to get to somebody who can help you through this. Because so that's sort of twofold admission on his part. One, he's admitting I screwed up and I'm gonna die, but two, he's saying, hey, you're still a kid and you still can't do this by yourself, go to somebody who can help you. And Tommy is that person, and he knows that having that discussion with Tommy would step in and fulfill that role for her. And Ellie, knowing that Tommy is the only option, would fight it less than she was going to previously, when Joel wasn't giving her the choice. So, yeah, Joel just thinks he's going to die. You're right that he is. This is the end for him. He doesn't think there's anything else that could be coming next for him in particular.
Yeah. The actual opening sort of establishing shots of the episode are going up this residential block, and there's just a trail of blood in the snow. And I love that so much. Visual storytelling for the win. It's not, I think, explicitly called out or shown, but at the end of the DLC, you see Ellie basically strap Joel to a snow sled and pull it with rope. And that's presumably somehow how she got him either back up on the horse or was able to transport him to this home as much this similar way, really. So it's fun and it's cool. Did you have anything else about the Joel and Ellie scenes?
Not the beginning one. I'll
Yeah.
have maybe more to say at the end.
Okay, so what do you think of FEDRA school?
Well, I have some questions. Do you think that all kids go through FEDRA school, or is this reserved for orphans, or are there multiple school? Like, I don't know. Like, obviously they can't all grow up to be FEDRA, because then there's nobody who's not FEDRA to police.
That's an
Yeah.
interesting question. I think of FEDRA as being the ever-present, ever-growing military arm of the public. I think the only people who wouldn't be in FEDRA or trained by FEDRA are the people who were already old when the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So I kind of do see almost, yeah, there are people, but like, who would that be that just gets to live and not go to FEDRA boarding school? But because it's clearly delineated to Ellie that there are two types of results that she can, and this is when Officer or Captain Kwong is telling her there's two paths she can go for all the trouble and mischief she's causing. I would expect that the majority of people aren't officers. The majority of people are grunts. And so
Right.
I would think that everybody does go to FEDRA school. It's just that a lot of them are on night patrols, eating shit food, as the guy says, and that kind of a thing. But yet, then again, there have to be people who are not in the arts. This is too hard a world, but people who are doctors, people who are, those sort of people don't necessarily get soldier training. But
Right.
yeah, I don't really know where they would go. I think answers from the game seem to indicate, and this is actually a change I'm looking forward to exploring, but Marlene placed Ellie
Right.
in the boarding school, in the FEDRA boarding school, as a result of wishes, somebody else's wish. And I'm avoiding spoilers here. And
Right.
in the game, Marlene knows Ellie. Ellie knows Marlene. Riley knew Marlene prior to joining the Fireflies, and that has all been changed for the show. So my guess is Ellie's happenstance being at this FEDRA boarding school, she probably thinks it's normal or that she was selected somehow, and maybe it is just orphans. Maybe it is just the orphan angle.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even Riley, we find out, was going to get a sort of elevated position. It's not an ideal one because she was going to be looking over sewage stuff, but she was still not going to be the one actually shoveling the sewage. She was going to be overseeing it. So, whether that means she's overseeing people who are alive when all of this actually went down, or whether it's just normal citizens not in the FEDRA program, who then end up shoveling sewage. So I don't know. It doesn't ultimately matter to the story. It was just a question I had.
Well, and it's probably orphans. It's probably
Yeah.
exactly what you said, because we find out that in the show that Riley talks about, she didn't really know her parents that long.
Right.
She's able to quote her mother about some of the looting and things they're seeing at the mall, but ultimately she said they weren't together very long. So yeah, it's orphans. So that's really interesting. I really enjoy seeing the Walkman. I think if you were of a certain generation that had a Sony Walkman, which I actually wasn't, I had the more portable, like smaller version of a Sony player. But knowing that it does come into play in the video game, and having actually just played that sequence after you left my stream last night, the Walkman and how it gets them into trouble is exactly the same in the game. And so seeing Ellie sort of jogging with it, doing exercise, and having it be taken from her and have that be a big thing that she cares about was really a wonderful just kind of thing. And Ellie really likes her music. She likes her Etta James. She really likes her Aha.
Yeah, that was a great surprise to see the Aha cassette there. Spoilers for season 2, I guess, but not that big a deal right now. I do have questions related to battery availability, but we don't have to linger on that.
I think that's fair to
um,
ask.
This is just me being silly. It's not a nitpick. But yeah, I really like the presence of the Walkman. Like you, I'm a couple years younger than you. But I did have a cassette player as a kid, not a Walkman specifically, but that was my very first music player, was a cassette player. So
There you go.
yeah, good
Yeah.
memories, I guess.
So, Ellie is in trouble because this girl, Bethany, has fallen on her wrong side. She said, "You're not a fighter, your friend is." And Ellie shows her that she's wrong. I
Well,
don't,
that was really
yeah,
interesting to me because uh, we see that Ellie has always been smart and she's always had that sort of tough exterior from what we see at the very beginning. But it seems that she wasn't physically aggressive until like this moment, basically, until Riley was gone and she couldn't rely on somebody else to stand up for her. And so I just thought that was really interesting that it was like a surprise to this Bethany girl when Ellie injured her
fucked
to the point of
her.
stitches.
Yeah. Oh, and Stitches. What a foreshadowing to what
Yeah.
she does for Joel at the end. But yeah, I think that it's really interesting to see Ellie as being the soft one compared to Riley. But I think also Riley's older. I think canonically, based on what the show says, Riley's 17, Ellie is 14. So Riley would be the person that Ellie looks up to get in fights. He's like a big sibling. I think my dad tells the story of his older brother would always help him. If my dad ever got into a fight with a kid from school and got roughed up by him, his bigger brother would go by and sort things, set things right. And that's just the way it works in the. My dad grew up in inner city, and that was just how you settled things. Is if you had a bigger brother, the other kids knew to look out. But without Riley, Ellie is a target. Ellie is able to be picked on like this, and the thing is, she thinks that's crap, and doesn't settle for it. Now, this wasn't the first time that she was under the microscope from Captain Kwong. He says, "Yeah, I wouldn't say you're always the best behaved kid, but let me lay this to you straight." And I can appreciate that he was very candid, I think, in his this is a person who, although FEDRA, even in this episode, is referred to as multiple times fascist dickbags. Here's a guy who's actually good at his job. If his role is to keep order, if his role is to raise soldiers that are girls, but also prevent conflict and help them reform their actions to be competent and conflict-free soldiers, that all the conflicts are external with clearing infected and doing everything they need to do for the QZ, then this guy nails it. This guy is able to empathize. He's able to level with Ellie in a way that she is not willing to sort of initially let him in, but he levels with her in a way that she connects with. And so even as she's having the best night of her life, she's telling Riley, "I should get back. I really can't make another mistake. I can't get another strike back at FEDRA school," because Ellie has bought in. Ellie's going to be an officer because that's better than being a grunt. And those are the two options.
Right. I hate that two paths option. Like he knows what he's doing. He's telling her the information that she needs to know, because for all she knows, those are the only two options in her life. She doesn't see the very near future that it is laid out in front of her, that we're witnessing here.
Mm.
And I mean, sometimes I feel like kids today are similarly limited. And it's just knowing about where you can sort of break off your own path. And as cliche of a thing that is to say, I'm glad that eventually Ellie is able to sort of break out of that system, despite the cause of her breaking out of the system.
Yeah, it's good. It is at such a cost, unfortunately. And had they stayed in the QZ, there really would not have been. I mean, the third option, the so-called third option, would be to join the Fireflies. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff relating to the Fireflies that I think is revealed sort of first in this show, which we'll get to. But something that ends up happening. So Riley shows up late at night. It's 2 a.m. Ellie has gone to bed. And actually in the video game, she pretends to be infected and makes kind of like a sound. And Ellie like is terrified, wakes up, nearly stabs her.
Oh my gosh.
That would have been way too much for my heart if that was adapted quite the same way. But looking around Ellie's room, this is another wonderful episode for visual storytelling of just props, movie posters, all of that kind of indicating who this person is. We get a few shots around the room. We get a look at the first edition of the pun book. We get a look at a few other things. The empty bed across the room, which I think we're led to believe in the show was Riley's, has drawings of outer space, drawings of the space shuttle, and things like that. I'm like, ooh, what if outer space, this thing we know Ellie likes, was a shared interest with her and Riley? And I mentioned that because catty corner across the room where Ellie's bed is, hanging behind her head, is a Joe Dante film called Inner Space.
I was hoping you were going to mention that, because you and I, Eric, have talked about that very film on my movie podcast, which is fantastic.
This so much. I was just reading earlier today, Chance the Rapper on Twitter said he boarded a flight and he was with his daughter and he couldn't get a seat together with his daughter. And a man was like, oh, before he even said anything, because he didn't want to inconvenience anybody, a man said, would you like to sit here? I'll move. Turns out the man was Martin Short. Oh. And Chance the Rapper's daughter freaked out because she is such a fan of my other favorite Martin Short movie that we have not talked about on your podcast, the Santa Claus 3, The Escape Clause. So okay, Martin Short, first of all, doing a good, and we have to talk about The Escape Clause at some point. He plays Jack Frost.
Do we? Okay.
Do we? Well, I don't know. You've always humored me very well with the movies that we talk about on that show. But I am a fan of Martin Short. I do remember going to the theater, again, when I worked there, actually, it was about that 2005, 2006 era, when that movie came out, to see Martin Short. I really, really liked him in that movie. I liked him by that point from Inner Space, Three Amigos, some other stuff. Anyway, I digress, but double dose of Martin Short today. I feel like I've won the lottery. I really honestly, between that story and then the movie poster, it's probably just meant to indicate like outer space on one wall, inner space on the other, unless they're about to do some kind of like Gremlins 2 takes place at a mall. There's a few connections you could possibly make here. But it's a wonderful poster to see on the wall, just because I am such a fan of this movie. Many people don't know it. It stars Dennis Quaid and Martin Short, and Meg Ryan. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah, plug for Cinescope, where Eric and I talked about Inner Space a long time ago at this point.
Yeah,
shout out, I'm drinking my coffee tonight out of a NASA mug that says it is rocket science.
It is rocket science. Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. What a wonderful. Did you choose that mug?
I saw it across the way and I was like, I should use that one tonight. And I love it. Here we are.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Yes. And so I will link everywhere to the Cinescope podcast Inner Space episode, because I really would request that everyone watch this movie that has a brand new, fresh breath of life into it from being right behind Bella Ramsey's head for a few seconds on tonight's HBO episode. So we mentioned the cassette tapes also, just really, great character detail. We're going to be hearing both of those bands throughout this episode. And we eventually go on to the Boston rooftops. Is there anything in sort of their initial relations that you wanted to talk about as Riley is coaxing Ellie out?
I love how upset Ellie is about Riley's departure and then sudden arrival. I mean, I can relate, not relate in that it's happened to me, but like I sympathize. I would probably feel similarly if somebody I was so close to and had feelings for, it turns out, we can talk about that later, just suddenly disappeared and then shows up randomly weeks later after I think that person is dead. So I like that Ellie is justified in her anger and is stubborn in standing up against her and saying, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to get in trouble. I've got these two paths. I got to stick to those two paths, and I want the good path, not the bad path. But Riley, knowing Ellie the way she does, pushes and says, you're going to say no at first, but then you need to say yes, and then you're going to come with me. And I like how well Riley knows her to know that Ellie will do that. Ellie will go along with her on this plan.
That was very much something that was mentioned at the behind the episode as well. Greg Mason said they needed to find somebody that had the upper hand on Bella Ramsey.
I love the way he phrased that. It was
Yeah.
something like, we know how great Bella Ramsey is. We have to find somebody who's on her level and can even have the upper hand over Ellie.
yeah, which is what that relationship was like in the DLC as well. Ellie even says in the game, oh, so stupid, like I'm so stupid, putting on her pants to go and do whatever adventure Riley wants to go on. So as they're jumping across rooftops in the QZ, which I can't wait to see the uproar on Twitter from it not being Boston again. Like there are no, it's just it's so sad. They do come across sort of Ellie's first dead body. Kind of an interesting rite of passage here, as they're going through an abandoned building with the street address of 423, my birthday. So funny. Tonight I really won the lottery.
Yeah, it seems.
They get alcohol, and actually I'm reminded that happens in the game as well. They actually swig a bottle. It happens once they're at the mall, but somebody they meet on the way has a bottle, and these are just two kids having fun. It really does look like what skipping school would be like in the apocalypse. Here, let's play hooky and go have fun, but there's this constant threat of danger.
That bottle, them drinking out of the alcohol bottle together, gives context to a quote from last episode, 2 episodes ago, when Ellie takes a swig out of Joel's flask, and I think she says still tastes good or still tastes bad, something to the effect. I can't remember if she's being sarcastic or serious about how it tastes, but here's where we witness where she tried alcohol for the first time.
Amazing.
And the dead body, speaking of that guy, I mean, it's sort of an omen for what's coming up next. This is a guy who it looks like at first maybe it was an accident that he mixed pills and alcohol, but Ellie says, you know what? I don't think it was so much of an accident. I think he got the outcome he wanted. And it's a guy who chose death instead of whatever else laid ahead of him. So, yeah.
They see themselves faced with that same choice at the end of this episode.
Yep.
It's really good stuff. You're right. So they get to the mall, and it turns out that Riley has had this whole plan of the 5 wonders of the mall. And how endearing is it that Ellie has never seen an escalator, and all of a sudden it's working?
Yeah, she had a slightly better reaction than Buddy the Elf upon seeing an escalator. No, I loved all of the lead up to the mall as they are hanging out and sort of getting comfortable with each other again. And Ellie's relaxing because they're drinking and she's remembering how much she enjoys being around Riley, no matter how angry she might have been at her. It's just two kids. They're hanging out, they're having fun, they're laughing at silly things, and they are being socially awkward like teenagers are. And you can see the early tells of each of them being interested in the other, but not quite knowing how far to take it. But then we get to the mall, and I do love how planned out Riley has made this whole experience. I mean, I won't say that this isn't something that one friend can do for another friend, but what I am saying is that Riley clearly knows Ellie really, really well and put a lot of time and effort into making this a special experience for someone she cares about, and more than a friend, it turns out. And I mean, the way she curates it in a certain order to make sense, the way she's thought ahead to get the quarters out of the machine at the arcade. And I know
Yeah.
we'll probably talk about all this in sequence, but just the little bit of thought that she put into everything, to sort of craft a perfect evening with Ellie. And also the sort of heartbreak in realizing that she's trying to make this night so perfect because she knows she's going to break Ellie's heart at the end of it.
Yeah, and that's such a manipulative but well-meaning thing to do. Is like, if you know you're going to cause somebody pain, you're going to soften that blow as much as possible. And it's like, well, why wouldn't you just not cause the pain? And it's like, well, life doesn't really work that way.
Manipulative. Yeah, we're having the same
Well,
argument again. So
okay, I think
no,
there's
no,
a
I
yeah.
I agree that from one perspective it can seem manipulative because she's sort of setting up for the blow to be cushioned. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree. But it's also selfish. Like, I don't know, one of my favorite things in the world to do is to take a movie that I really like and I've already seen it and introduce somebody who has never experienced that before, because I know that they're going to like it, and I want to see every single time my favorite quote comes up and how they react to it, or one of my favorite characters appears, or there's a really cool action scene or whatever. I love, love, love almost more than watching the movie itself. I love watching the people's reaction. And so that's what Riley is doing here. It's a sort of selfish experience for her in seeing this is something that I know that Ellie is going to love, and it's going to bring me a lot of joy to see
What
how much Ellie loves this thing that I've set up for her.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And because we
So
know too, in the game, in the show, she's been stationed here. Ellie really works it out that the reason she spent so much time here, and it's different, because in the game this is a place they used to come all the time, and in the show this is Ellie's first time. So that sense of wonderment, that sense of awe, talking about each of the shops as they pass, is really genuine from Ellie. And Riley is the master event planner, the curator, the tour guide that is giving her this experience. Agreed, non-selfishly, not yeah, selfishly. So I love that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's two sides of the same coin because there is definitely that sort of manipulation of trying to soften the blow
She's
too.
just trying
Yeah,
to, yeah. And I think that it really is in everyone's best interest to cause as little pain as possible. So if she can
right.
give her this good experience, I think she thinks that Ellie is more likely to forgive her. And as their relationship develops, it seems very organically they're finding out more about each other. And because of the short time that they have left when they're getting prepared to say goodbye and just go their separate ways, the heightening of the emotions really works to lead to their kiss, their basically confession of mutual romantic feelings for one another. And that's such a wonderful journey to watch happen as they get upset with each other and try and work with each other and are having fun together and doing these fun things. It's just a really nice relationship that's been encapsulated in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it's really efficient storytelling. And remind me, did Riley give Ellie the joke book in the game too?
Yes, Joe.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. I wasn't sure if that was the case or if it was like the comics that we find throughout the world and Ellie found the joke book herself. Either way, I like that Riley is the one who gave her the joke book because again, it's showing how well she knows Ellie and knowing that she'd appreciate something like that.
Yeah, and that they pull it out right after the Halloween store, which happens a bit sooner in the game. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really great thing to see. It's good to see the volume 2 be handed to her. They go through a few more puns. Who doesn't love puns, honestly? It's just like let's do a supercut of all the puns in this show by the end of it all. But it's such a good humorous moment, and we get a few puns we didn't really have before. So more commentary as they go down on what life was like before the pandemic. This happened last week when Ellie asked Joel, is this really all they had to worry about? Matching skirts and boys. But the shoes all being taken from the mall and the soap all still being there at the mall. What a
Right.
wonderful, like, commentary on we don't know what the hell we actually need.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the thing that you're going to need is the thing that's going to keep you on your feet and keep you moving.
Oh,
And
so the
soap isn't
shoes
necessarily.
keep you moving, right, on your
Yeah,
feet.
yeah, and
Okay,
the
okay,
soap's
got
not
it.
necessarily going to be the thing that you're going to need in the long term.
Oh man, okay. Well, I think that maybe soap is harder to come by for FEDRA, maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe that's the point. But because I was thinking of it more like, no, soap is clearly the more useful item than a bunch of $200 a pair sneakers. But I digress. I think you proved me wrong.
Yeah.
So uh, you know, little things that I really liked, and we don't need to go wonder by wonder. But as they're passing the Victoria's Secret and Riley makes the joke, oh, trying to picture what you would look like. She's like, oh, shut up. Ellie nevertheless looks at her reflection in the glass there and kind of just adjusts her hair a little bit. And it was this perfect moment of like self-conscious, like vulnerability, like, oh, do I look okay? Like
Hmm.
just the little subtle things that are happening with Ellie and with Riley in their micro expressions as they relate to one another is really satisfying. You can tell that the actors worked really hard on presenting that relationship and getting it just right.
Right. And I mean, even scenes like the photo booth where they get a little taste of some of the stress that we go through in today's world, where
Oh
it's like, oh
God.
no, I only have 3 seconds to pose for the next picture or whatever. Like they get a little taste of that, and it's a fun little memory for them. And I'm sure that those pictures are going to pop up at some point in the next couple of episodes. Riley or Ellie pulls them out of her backpack or something. Maybe to like, hey Joel, this is something about myself that I want to share with you. I don't know. But that's a good thought.
Yeah, I mean, when they're on the carousel and look over at the photo booth, Riley gestures over and Ellie asks, is that a time machine? It's not a time machine.
Yeah.
If you really think about it, I mean, photographs are moments in time
Yeah. Windows
and
to the past.
windows to the past or the future or whichever way you're going. It also looks like a time. It's very funny comment there.
Yeah.
Because it works on many levels, but yeah, I just find that there are some things that were made for the mall. It's interesting to see real brands. Again, they really play Mortal Kombat 2. It's not some generic game called The Turning with a character Angel Knives. No, this is Mortal Kombat 2, which Ellie was telling Joel about, I think, when they were at the gas station. And she talked about Melina and the character of Melina's fatality, where she spits out your bones. We get to see where she gets that for the first time with Riley, and it's a wonderful, amazing experience. That said, there is some of the fictional video game world stuff in here. Did you catch the poster for Dawn of the Wolf Part 2?
I did. I even looked it up in the moment just to make sure I didn't think it was a real thing. I was pretty sure it was something from the game, and it is. It's pretty great.
Yeah, yeah. There are some things that I think were too good not to put in. I think another one is Macho Nacho. Unless that's a real chain, unless you're about to tell me that there's a nacho chain you know about called Macho Nacho. I know because I just had to pivot over it on hard mode when I was avoiding a clicker last night. By the way, I succeeded. I know you congratulated me on trying my first Last of Us game on hard with Left Behind last night. But yeah, Macho Nacho is totally a chain, and it's in this episode. I was thrilled.
I love the disparaging look that Riley gave Ellie, as Ellie's like, "Oh, is this a surprise that you're giving me tacos?" And Riley's just like, "Really? You really think there's still tacos here
Oh,
after all
that would
this
be so
time?"
bad. They would both get really
I
sick.
mean, honestly, that processed cheese is probably still just as quote fresh as it was in 2003.
That's difficult to think about. But yeah, I mean, everything from the A&W restaurant, which I just love. A&W restaurants, they kind of stopped being a thing right around the time, or at least in Chicagoland, right when I first found them. But going there, getting a root beer on tap, one of our favorite San Antonio root beer places is the only thing that tops A&W root beer to me.
I still have some bottles of that in my fridge downstairs,
Oh,
by the way.
good. I'll be right over. Um, but yeah, this is sort of where it comes up. So Ellie finds a little bit more about Riley, and she basically has pipe bombs, and the Fireflies are not only trusting Riley at this point, to guard these, but they're also moving her out. Like the Fireflies are using this mall as some kind of a base or staging area for whatever they have coming next. And this is the point where it gets really dark, actually. Ellie is saying, are you going to use these? And Riley's like, oh, we would never anywhere near you. And Ellie's like, well, how can you know, really? And she
Right.
can't.
She said she's being moved to the Atlanta QZ. Isn't the Atlanta QZ the one that has been name dropped before as being like particularly rough?
I think that's right.
Yeah. Or maybe that's where like the pills and the bullets are manufactured the most or something like that. There was some comment about Atlanta QZ in a past episode, and I don't remember exactly what it was. Yeah, it's tough for Ellie to hear what Riley is doing with the Fireflies because she has grown up in the FEDRA program, and all they say is how Fireflies are like terrorists, basically. And she's seen the damage that they've done. And she comments on how the Fireflies bombed a storage depot, and that certainly didn't help with the food shortages. And now her best friend is aligning herself with that group. And Ellie is just sort of trying to turn over a new leaf to be a better person in the FEDRA program so that she can get the better outcome and become an officer herself. And that obviously wouldn't go over very well to have an officer in FEDRA be friends or have a relationship or have any connection to somebody who's part of this terrorist organization in the Fireflies. But I really like how Riley comes around to explaining her involvement with the Fireflies, because you mentioned this earlier, but Riley, as a child, did have her parents, and the first dead bodies she ever saw were her parents. We don't get context for that here, but she had and lost something in her life. She had and lost people in her life. And so when she was given this assignment, because she's about to turn 17 and she's going to be working sewage, and obviously nobody wants to do anything related to sewage if you can avoid it. And so she runs, and then Marlene finds her and is complimentary of her skills in sneaking around the city and chooses Riley to be a part of the Firefly. She's chosen like a family would choose you. It means something to Riley to have that sort of familial connection to the Fireflies, and that's ultimately what she's clinging to more than I think any sort of ideal for freeing the QZ that she claims to hold to with the Fireflies.
Yeah, that was a really powerful scene where she's kind of selling Ellie on the whole thing as well. That the one component they are missing and in want of at FEDRA, or at least Riley was that family sense, which is the number one thing FEDRA is never going to be like.
Right.
There is a chain of command in FEDRA, and they're training soldiers. They can't possibly be your mommy and daddy. They're going to choose you and nurture you and give you that safe space. So it's interesting because the Fireflies are no less dangerous. They're going around handing pipe bombs to 17-year-olds.
And
But
guns.
yeah, and guns, but they are portrayed that way. Riley sees them as very much more likely to fit the bill of a family for her than FEDRA ever will. So
Yeah, but Riley says that I matter to them. They chose me and I matter to them. I make a difference or whatever. And Ellie counters with, you matter to me first.
Yeah.
Like you were the one that I chose before they chose you. And
Yeah. That's a
yeah,
good counter. But how desperate are the Fireflies, do we think?
I don't know.
To be recruiting so young?
Yeah.
Like, I will say it's such an interesting thing to keep in mind, the timing here, because by the time Tess and Joel meet Ellie, she says it's 3 weeks since she's been bitten. So that's 21 days after these events. And
Uh-huh.
so that's actually not a lot of time. In that time, Marlene and Ellie have met. Presumably Ellie has, like, we know what's going to happen. Riley is going to turn, and Ellie will not turn. And at that point, she'll probably seek out Marlene and kind of, then she's put in the cage and everything we saw at the beginning of the thing. So it's just, I always think it's more time has passed than it actually has. So the part that Ellie at this point doesn't know Marlene actually makes that very interesting. Like, I want to know why they made that a choice, because it seems like Marlene was generally well known by Ellie and Riley in the game, and it's just some woman, and she happens to be the head of the Fireflies, and she happens to know Ellie since she was very young, and happen to, all this stuff. Making her a stranger is an interesting choice, because there's a lot of trust that Ellie has to build towards Marlene in order to be able to feel safe around her and do everything that she's going to do to go with Joel.
Well, I think making her a stranger to Ellie just shows the trust that Ellie has or had in Riley.
Mm,
If Riley was able to place her faith in Marlene, then Ellie can as well, is what I think they're trying to give us.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. One thing that I really loved that I should call out is not just the appearance of Aha's Take on Me, which happens, the entire song plays when they're just on the escalator. Ellie's
Yeah.
just messing around, and it's like most the song. And then as soon as they get off, the song is done. And it's just like, wow, that they wasted a whole 3 minutes, spent a whole 3 minutes on Ellie's excitement, which I think is exactly the right way. But when they get on the carousel is this usual nice melody, bandstand music. Although in this case, it's more of like a music box music. And I recognized the song,
Mhm.
which is not, did you as well?
Yeah, it definitely felt like there were tinges of Take on Me within that, right? That's what you're saying, isn't it?
It's a Cure song.
A
It's
Cure song.
a,
Okay.
a song by the Cure called Just Like Heaven. And
Okay.
it's actually like a music box version of it that is
Okay.
playing on the carousel. Guess what year that song came out?
Oh, no, it's gonna be an 80s
What
song, isn't
decade?
it?
Yeah, what
Yeah,
decade? Yeah,
80s.
80s song. So between Take on Me, playing on the escalator as they're entering the mall properly, and the carousel playing The Cure Just Like Heaven, which is good on like 50 different levels. Um, there's still this element of trouble, because remember, the 80s equal trouble. And
Yeah.
they're still doing it. They're still doing the 80s mean trouble to get you in that mindset of things are not okay. Ellie's having the best moment of her life, and it's trouble. Trouble
Yeah.
looming.
Goodness. And I mean, to speak of the moments right before the biggest trouble comes in this episode, I love how Ellie is the one to sort of step up and make the first move with Riley in the Halloween store. And um, this is after their conversation about why Riley has joined the Fireflies, and is this really a cause that she wants to dedicate herself, and is she really going to go to Atlanta, and is this really something that's important to her? And Riley says yes. This says yes, I'm going to go. This is something I need to do. But when Ellie steps up and kisses her, and they both realize that they have those mutual feelings for each other, the moment when Ellie asks Riley, don't go, Riley says, okay. And that is such a beautiful moment. I love how Riley is so willing to at least seemingly willing to cancel all of her plans because this girl that she liked actually does like her back. Maybe she had worries that it was unreciprocated or something. I don't know. But then obviously it's all ripped away moments later.
Yeah, it's a shame because there is that sort of trope of bury your gaze that as soon as it's revealed this character has to die. This show is far more thoughtful than that, but I can see it being some criticisms being leveled at it, like can't gay people be happy? Like even Bill and Frank, who were very happy for a very long time and at least got the best ending as any character we're likely to see on this show, ultimately did have to die, and did die at the end of their episode. So it's kind of it's just a shame because as much as I love seeing this relationship on screen, I knew how it was ending.
Right.
So that's a shame, but it definitely is important to go through life and have these moments. And you're right, it was insecurity. They both weren't sure that the other felt that way. And I just love when two people that know each other are able to confess that feeling and have it reciprocated. There's no greater feeling, surely,
Yeah,
than
Ellie
somebody.
says she
Yeah,
apologizes after she kisses Riley, and Riley says, "For what?"
for what?
And that's when it becomes clear that they both like each other in that way, which is really amazing.
It's perfect. So the one thing that I love also that was adapted from the video game but changed slightly is the doll store. And what a creepy turn into like a Sam Raimi horror film when you get this like slow pan into the doll store, which is a store that essentially in the video game, Ellie has to go to the pharmacy, but the door into the first aid kit is locked, and the pharmacist is next door in the doll store where he's just died. He's grown into the wall a little bit. It's exactly like in the show. It looks exactly the same. It's so good. It's basically like a what American Girl doll factory kind of
I'm
store.
pretty sure it is American Girl. I think there's a sign.
There you go.
Yeah.
The difference is when Ellie has to get the key off the pharmacist, who's this guy, she's, oh, don't come alive. I hate it when they come like, don't come alive. And he actually falls forward, but is not alive. In the video game, there's dozens of infected that chase them. And it was just so much cleaner, so much better to have that guy be awakened by the vibrations and everything we've learned so far about how the fungus communicates, how there's this network, and essentially have this scout, this guy who's clearly on some cellular level still alive, being kept alive by the fungus. What kind of a hell that must be for until somebody comes into the mall and this thing decides to, okay, wake him up, detach him, and send him out. Like, it's extra levels of creepy. It just is so much better to have just this one guy who was near death coming out and being the threat that gets them both.
Yeah. You see Riley pull her gun and struggle to shoot this thing. I think she maybe gets it in the side once or twice, but maybe that gives further fuel to the fire for Ellie wanting to be adept at owning and using her own firearm
Maybe.
in the future. Um, and the way that Ellie eventually does kill this infected by stabbing it in the head, it gives new context to that moment back in episode 3 when Ellie stabbed the trapped infected in the head at the bottom of that convenience store. It's like we pondered what that moment meant in when we talked about that episode. Do you remember that? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we pondered what that moment meant, and we maybe thought, maybe it's just Ellie testing the waters. Like, is this something that I could do? But I think it's more now looking back, it's more her remembering the last time she stabbed and infected in the head and what that moment was, which was
And,
this.
and if she sees the fungus and all the infected as being one hive mind, which it's not really, they're not, about
Yeah,
that. Her stabbing that guy in the head is a continual FU to
right,
the cordyceps, as if
right.
she's looking the cordyceps in the face and saying, uh, I'm gonna
Yeah.
stab you. And this is me still having power, still surviving. And that does add much more context to the scene in 3 in a really cool way.
Yeah. And she's sort of reveling in the moment, like, we survived this, we're still alive. And then she realizes that she's been bitten, and there's just that utter heartbreak, and she tries to like rub it away. Oh gosh, it's so terrible. And she thinks she's lost everything, but the way Riley just sort of wordlessly shows her own bite in response, I mean, it lessens the sting a little bit, I think, because I mean, they theoretically won't be leaving the other, but obviously it still sucks when they basically had both expressed their love for each other and were going to spend as much of their lives together as they could. And I mean, that's still the case now. It's just on a much shorter timetable.
Yeah, and it's really beautiful how they talk about their options together and decide. There's this great line, which was great in the game too, of maybe we'll be all poetic and shit and lose our minds together. Eventually, at some point, Ellie does tell Joel about that she had this friend that did that. Um, but remember, she tells Tess that she was alone when she got bitten.
Right.
So it's nice to see sort of the full journey of Ellie reconnecting with her past, certainly thinking about it as she fights to keep Joel alive uh, this time.
I liked the
So,
character deep dive that was given in the behind the scenes at the end of the episode, where they talk about how Riley, having lost her parents as a kid, had experienced loss before, and so her reaction in this moment was to sort of just be calm and to not enjoy the moment, but to not like waste her moments getting angry. Which is exactly what Ellie does. She's smashing up the display cases that they were just dancing on, and Riley's like, "Oh, well, there's more stuff to break over there if you want to go do that." But it really is an interesting uh, comparison between the two of them, from one who has lost and the other who has not.
yep, it's good stuff. Any other thoughts before we move on to sort of our final bit and spoiler section?
Well, the only other thing to say to sort of close out the bit by bit, I love the lesson of fighting to the very end, which is what Riley sort of commits them both to doing, to clinging to every moment that you have left, no matter how bleak it looks. So they're going to ride this out together, whether it's 2 hours or 2 days, she says. And then this is juxtaposed with what Ellie and Joel are going through in the present day. And so Ellie begins a desperate search for something around the house. She's throwing open medicine cabinets and drawers, and we don't know what she's looking for. And honestly, I don't know what she's really looking for in that moment, but she does find something that'll work, which is needle and thread, and goes down to the basement and starts stitching Joel up. And at the beginning of the episode, before we got to the actual Left Behind flashback, Joel is telling Ellie to leave him behind, and she kind of wordlessly covers him with a coat and goes upstairs, and you see a tear fall down his cheek. And it's like she is leaving him. That's what he's telling her to do, but it's almost like, please don't actually do that. Um, and then, so when she comes back down with the needle and the thread,
Yeah.
he appears relieved.
Yeah.
And well, after we get the scare of him maybe being dead, and he kind of awakens a little bit and jolts up, and he doesn't fight what Ellie is trying to do. You see the relief in his eyes, however long later it's been, and she's not given up on him. She's going to fight to the very end and cling to every moment that they have left, no matter how bleak it looks, just like she and Riley did. So,
She's never going to let him down again.
yeah. Aha.
So call out to Etta James's version of I Got You Babe, the Sonny and Cher song. That is from the 60s.
It was really good.
But nevertheless was the song that draws the infected attention in the game as well. So it's another one, and there was like, it was too good to change. Let's keep it and get it for the show.
Yeah.
So that will conclude our recap and reactions in the non-spoiler section. And if you'd like to email us, please do so at thankyouforspieling@gmail.com. And you can find Chad on Twitter, Chadadada. You can find me on Twitter at Spielerman. And yeah, we're about to post everything out by the spoiler warning, but thank you all who continue to watch and listen and enjoy the show. And we sure as heck enjoy making it. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
And here we go to spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, lift off. Spoiler time. This is a section of the show placed behind a spoiler warning because, as Pedro Pascal says,
some things must stay sacred.
If you don't want to be spoiled, keep the rest of the episode sacred, and we'll see you next week. I got a very specific question to start off our spoiler section, Chad, here. Back at the FEDRA school in this episode, Bethany remind you of anybody looks-wise?
I will say she did not. But when I saw you had this question in the doc, I was like, okay, I know what you're talking about. She looks like Abby, right? Is that what you're saying?
Her hair, the braid on both sides that goes down is such an Abby look. And I'm looking forward to somebody else calling this out. But for me, yes, 100%, it spoke Abby to me.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see, because we're going to see Abby.
No, yeah, I'll get a screenshot. I'll text it to you. But yeah, the it's kind of funny to make to give Ellie this antagonist and have Ellie triumph over this antagonist, although they both kind of got beaten up a little bit. And then see kind of just dead ringer in my mind. Definitely. So
yeah,
that thrilled me.
I really liked the use of Take on Me in this episode. I mean, like I said earlier, I liked the appearance of the cassette tape for Aha, and I thought that was all we were going to get, but then we got the actual song. And so I like that they're seemingly tying that to being Ellie's sort of connection to the people she loves, that song in particular, because we know in part 2 with Dina, who we mentioned last episode, that there is a scene somewhat early in the game, or at least once they get to Seattle, where Ellie plays on the guitar and sings Aha's Take on Me for Dina. And so there's that emotional connection there. There's the emotional connection to Joel, because Joel's the one who taught her to play the guitar in the first place, or is going to teach her at this point. So lots of connections with Take on Me. I really like that they're sort of setting that up to be a super heartbreaking thing in the future.
But as you said, it's Ellie's connection with those that she loves. And so that's like a really cool thing that they could have done. And again, following the maybe Dina reveal, and the official Last of Us podcast, is that not Dina? It's not Dina. It's not Dina.
Right.
Who knows? They're really doing a lot of part 2 stuff. And I towards the end of season 1 here, and I really like it.
Yeah. The other question I had looking into next episode was, do you think they're going to show us the ending moments of Ellie and Riley? I mean, even the new audience here knows what happens. Like, it's not going to be a mystery at this point, because clearly Riley is gone and Ellie survived, and we know everything that's happened since then. But since Ellie told Joel that she had killed someone before, and we can assume that it's Riley, right? That we might see that moment to help the new audience members to make that connection or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, there's enough puzzle pieces. I think it's substantial without showing us, but I would want to see it just because I love the actors doing it. But yeah, I mean, look, the two of them are bitten. Ellie's still around unexpectedly. Right. She finds her way to Marlene. All these things are in there. If it does occur, it should occur. Let's say, so at the end of last episode, we speculated where the 2 cameos from the video game actors will be appearing. And I think it's safe to say now, because we did not get an Ashley Johnson appearance this episode, that the appearance will be happening in episode 9. So I can see there being a flashback from very early times, and we basically establishing Marlene's relationship, how Marlene always knew of Ellie, and then that can cut to Ellie coming to Marlene right before the events of episode 1 and saying, this is what happened. You recruited Riley, take me in her stead. Also, you've been bitten, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I would place it if I were to do, but even then we wouldn't necessarily get Ellie shooting Riley. And that would be maybe overkill.
I mean, I don't think they need to like explicitly show it.
Yeah.
Something sort of akin to maybe Henry shooting himself a couple of episodes back.
Yeah, cut to black.
You see the struggle leading up to that moment, and the panic in Ellie's eyes as she realizes that her friend has turned and she is not. And then the difficult choice of what comes with that revelation. So I don't know. I don't think they need to show it. I was just curious what your thoughts on whether they would.
Yeah, I like the idea of it maybe getting a little bit more of like the Ellie meets Marlene. Because I mean, if we were going by basically character-centric episodes and each character gets a different focus on a different episode, then episode 9 is the Marlene episode for sure. So I can see that really explaining a lot, and Marlene wrestling with the choices that she's going to make would be a great opportunity to kind of show her whole history with Ellie. So that's going to be real good stuff, but let's talk briefly about next week on. I really had nothing else for this episode. I loved it so much. But yeah, there's nothing spoiler wise else that I had. We get to see a restaurant burning, or like a lodge burning to the ground with people in it. And I've never been more giddy to see something that is potentially hazardously expensive, something that is preventatively too big budget to film, ever be filmed, and we see that it's happening. So if that's happening, you know that they're not shying away for the next episode.
Right. We obviously also see Troy Baker in the previews for next episode, which is cool. We see David, which is less cool. I mean, obviously I want more The Last of Us, and I'm quote looking forward to next episode, but also I'm like, I'm not looking forward to what's coming up next, because I know how tough it is. But I also know that, oh man, that emotional release at the end of next episode is going to be really, really good. So we have that to look forward to, but there's a lot to get through until we get to that point.
Yeah,
it's gonna be tough.
The big question I have, and this is more speculation, so based on what they did in this episode, and they cut out a lot of infected and soldiers, as they have done all season. All these huge action moments in the game just do not need to have all these people in the show. Now, however, David is with a small group of people. David is the leader of all this small group of people. It's an uneasy alliance. People question his motives all the time, whatever. But they have a very particular lifestyle, shall we say. If it were just that David dies and Ellie and Joel go on their way, they would be hunted. They would be found out by, like, these people would follow them. And so I think the only way that Joel and Ellie walk cleanly away from the next episode is if a lot of other people die. Like, the whole group basically has to burn or get killed. Do we expect next episode will feature kind of some of that action where it's like Joel to the rescue, having to shoot some of these people as he finds his way to protect? It turns out, shoes on the other foot, Joel is just recovered enough to go rescue Ellie from this group.
I don't know. I'm of a couple different minds of this. Like, I think there would be something really satisfying in seeing Joel healed to the point of being able to come to the rescue and like exacting cold revenge on everybody who's sort of taken place in this abuse of Ellie that is sort of being set up in that episode, in that community. But also I think there's something to be said of saving the biggest show of violence from Joel for the last episode. And particularly how that sets up what happens in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what I would prefer. I mean, obviously I want David to die a terrible death. But maybe you mentioned the sort of questioning of authority from the others in his group, and you even hear in the previews that they showed us Troy Baker's character sort of questioning, like, I mean, do we really need to keep her around? She's another mouth to feed. And so maybe if they do seek the less overall violent approach for this next episode, they could set it up as a falling out that the group has with their leader. And so to see him die just allows them all to go their separate ways and let Joel and Ellie live.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think what you have suggested is probably more likely, all things considered, especially considering the arc in the final episode, that what they have to do, and then also just the general trend that Druckmann and Mazin continue to make amazing choices that just work but are different.
Yeah, so, and if I phrased any of that too spoilery for the end of the season, please feel free to.
Spoiler section.
Yes, yeah. I know, but I still hesitate to
I know.
Drop the big ones.
I know. The one thing I do want from David, and I hope we get it before his end, presumably, that we're speculating about. I do want him to charm me a little. The game had this quality. He has this quality of having this faith in Ellie. He sees something in her. He really admires like her fight and wants to kind of bring it into the group as this power dynamic. And I just hope all of those beats are hit, because otherwise he's just some sicko.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, from what we saw of him, he seems real creepy. So
yeah. I mean, he's not creepy in the game, but again, there is something about him. You're like, this is a guy who is another survivor that did things he had to do to survive. I don't know. I want some very specific moments from the game, I think in particular, but maybe it won't be David as the charmer at all. Maybe it'll be the Troy character, the Troy.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well.
Yeah, all the human elements that David had will be going to Troy Baker's character, which is just as well. I don't feel particularly closely to any of these next group of people we're going to meet enough for it to matter. And
yeah,
what the showrunners are doing is so much better anyway. So I think that must be it, unless you've got another thing.
I don't have another thing. That is all for me.
Okay, well, 7 days from now, let's meet back and let's talk about the penultimate episode.
Oh gosh. Wow. We're almost there.
We really are. But yeah, thank you, Chad, for sporing with me as always.
And thank you for sporing as well.
And yeah, definitely linking. And I'm going to listen to our Inner Space episode again, because I'm really I'm sure that my passion came out.
Yeah, I'll have to rewatch that movie again, because I've only seen it that one time and I remember 0 things about it.
Oh, okay. 0 defects. There we go. Cool. Well, thank you. And yeah, we'll catch you next time. And bye to everyone who is watching this on YouTube and everyone's listening wherever podcasts are found. Thank you very much for being on this journey with us.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Reach out.
Yeah, do it. Reach out, touch faith. That's a Depeche Mode.